So I don't know the last time I enjoyed a court case as much as the Fani Willis court case yesterday. Fani Willis, in case you don't know, she is the woman that is going after Donald Trump in Atlanta, and she's fantastic. I just love this. So apparently she was having an affair with one of her underlings. And I don't know if he was under, well, let's just leave it at that. And having an affair and paying all kinds of money. In fact, a lot more than anybody else on her staff in that role. But he was such an expert. And they found out that, those two were having an affair. And he was cheating on his wife. And looks like there's some ethics problems there. So now she's in court because her credibility is shot. And the Trump people have said she really needs to be removed from this case because she's got, ulterior motives and there's another agenda going on, et cetera, et cetera. So, you see it yesterday, Stu?
Oh, yes. I sure did, Glenn.
Yeah.
I watched every second of it I could ingest.
Yeah.
It was incredible.
Yeah, it was good. The first thing that I saw was he gets up on the stand and he's testifying that, he didn't lie to the court during his divorce proceedings. He just got divorced. When was it? Last year? No, this year, right?
Very recent,
late,
yeah.
Yeah, very recent. Maybe it was early or late last year. But he got a divorce, and all this came up in the divorce court, that he was having an affair with Fani Willis. Well, he denied that in court. And when asked about it, he said, well, it's because his marriage had what is it?
Irreconcilable differences?
Yeah, yes. And he couldn't, so his marriage was over. So he considered his marriage over when he was having an affair.
See, I consider my marriage over on Friday nights and Saturday nights, and then it picks back up on Sunday. I like that. You could just kind of, is that a new thing? You could just name when your marriage is over and then it's not cheating? Wow.
Our marriage was over at that point.
Remember, I remember Bill Clinton being just like, hey, yeah, when she's under the desk, the marriage is over. And then we flip the switch back on for public appearances.
I've never heard that excuse before.
I like it.
Okay, so he did that. And then apparently he was reimbursed for all of the vacations and everything else. Play cut 3, please.
You said in the affidavit that you roughly shared travel, though, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So this roughly sharing travel, you're saying she reimbursed you?
She did.
And where did you deposit the money she reimbursed you?
Oh, it was cash. She didn't give me any checks.
I think this is so obvious.
She paid you cash for her share of all these vacations.
Mr. Schaefer, you'll step out if you do that again.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Someone laughed.
And so all of the vacations that she took, she paid you cash for?
Yes, ma'am.
And you purchased all of these vacations on your business credit card, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And you included those in deductions on your taxes, correct?
No, ma'am.
I mean, there's so much here. We're deep into it at this point. But just to think about what they're saying here, because if you back up a little bit, the reason why this is an issue and why this was brought up initially by one of the co-defendants of, as well as Donald Trump and Giuliani and all these other guys, this is a smaller defendant that no one really ever talked about. The reason why it was brought up is if they're having an affair, he's making hundreds of thousands of dollars from this trial. Fani, and she likes to call her Fani Willis, is motivated to continue this trial for as long as possible because her boyfriend is getting all this cash. So instead of having a pursuit of justice, you have a pursuit of your own financial benefit because the longer this goes on, the more assignments this guy gets, the more money he gets, and then they go on vacations together, which he's paying for. This is the accusation. And if that's the case, well, maybe the motivation here is not to see where, to get us to justice here for the people of Georgia, but maybe to make sure she gets to Belize and Aruba and Miami and all the other vacations they discussed during this. So that's the reason why this is important, partially. The other part of it is that they said the relationship didn't start till 2022, and if it started before that, they lied to the court. That's a whole other problem.
There's plenty of problems here. There's plenty of problems.
Their excuse for this that we are supposed to believe, they actually are telling us we should believe this excuse, is that Wade buys expensive vacations to Aruba and a bunch of different places. He puts it on his business credit card. And then they go on the vacations. They spend all this money, Napa Valley, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars on these vacations. And then she shows up and just hands him $4,000 in cash, which in turn, he never deposits into his bank account. We are supposed to believe. Now, there's no record of any of this happening because, of course, it's all cash. There's not a cash. There's no Venmo. There's no Cash App. There's no checks. Nothing. It's all cash. And then he takes the cash and never deposits any of it into his bank account.
He said he may have given some of it to his children.
Oh, of course. I mean, there's
may have done that.
Now, Glenn, it's important to understand how human beings act. And this series of events has never occurred between any two human beings in American history. There's never been a case ever in history where a man bought something on his business card for $8,000. And then when he showed up for the vacation, his girlfriend paid him back $4,000 in cash, which he never deposited. This has never occurred in the history of human interaction.
Well, are you done?
No, I can keep going for hours on this. It was fascinating.
You have no idea. What it means to be a black woman.
Apparently not.
You have no idea what it means to be a black woman.
This was her excuse, by the way, Glenn. This legit. What you're saying here is not a joke.
I'm going to give you.
This is really what she said.
No, it's not a joke. She's not, this is not a joke, Stu. I've got it from the Washington Post. She explained the two split the cost, with Willis paying him back in cash. Thousands of dollars in cash. At the time, many businesses only accepted electronic payments, and many people never carry cash. Wade made a mess of explaining why Willis was handing over wads of untraceable dollars. He began many sentences with, well, here's the thing. And by the time he reached to the end of the sentence, well, there was no thing there. Now, remember, this is the Washington Post, okay? But then, Wade sat in the witness chair, his gray plaid three-piece suit with his white French cuff shirt, gold cufflinks, and powder blue pocket square. He grimaced and smiled and repeatedly referenced his wife's affair as the cause of his filing for divorce in 2021, even though no one had asked him why he split with his wife, but rather when he started his relationship with Willis. But the two have said their romance began to become after he became a special prosecutor afterwards. He had a hard time with the timeline of his relationship. He drank lots of water, dabbed his face, and sniffed even more vigorously. Then they talk about how they started, giving all of the money. Willis lectured the gathered attorneys on the philosophy behind keeping cash on hand. Her father taught her that cash was king, and a woman should always be financially self-reliant. And so, yes, she had stashes of cash that she had accumulated over time, and she used it to reimburse Wade. She dipped into it before a trip so she could pay taxi drivers or barter with vendors. Her description of her father's advice was a compressed version of a very complicated history and modern-day habit. She didn't go into the discomfort that some black people have with financial institutions, or the way in which banks have made it more difficult for black people to do business with them. She didn't mention that more older people believe in keeping ready cash, that a significant percentage of black and Hispanic Americans use cash for their predominant payment method. She didn't have to. She simply talked about what her father had told her to do as a matter of independence and power. I don't need any man to foot my bills, Willis said. Wow.
But By the way, yeah, she kept bringing up the dad. Like, my dad would be disappointed that I only had $40,000 at my house. Just like, okay. By the way, the dad, former Black Panther, in case you were interested in why he was so motivated to have cash. He's a former Black Panther, which just a little note as to the possible.
Listen to the way you're framing this.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
I am framing it as someone with a very extreme group, the history of that.
Yeah. Let me play the counterpoint here and just point out what the New York Times said. Willis sat in the witness chair for hours, or more precisely, she reclined in the chair, woman-splaining how men define relationships and how they would end them. She did so while wearing a fuchsia dress and a single strand of beads around her neck. Her hair was styled in soft shoulder-length curls, and her eye makeup was precise and intentional. Shush, this is journalism. She was a singular bright spot, surrounded by a black-robed judge and lawyers, mostly in somber suits. Only Willis and her main inquisitor, Merchant, who wore a cobalt blue dress under a white blazer, stood out in the room's sobriety. Willis walked into court as a woman on the ropes. Some would say the hearing was a mess of her own making. Yeah. Others might believe the whole mess is a distraction from more important matters. But either way, Willis fought back with gobsmacking fury, defiant in power pink. End quote.
Incredible. By the way, I think that's the same story that ends this way. The hearing resumes on Friday. Ms. Willis is expected to take the stand for more grilling. The defense lawyers will likely crowd again onto one side of the packed courtroom. They are, in aggregate, a sea of boxy wool suits and white male faces.
My gosh.
What the hell kind of coverage is?
My gosh.
An aggregate sea of white faces? What the hell is this? It's like they just hired Ibram Kendi to cover the trial. What is going on? It's embarrassing.
Here's one thing. We're going to get back to the actual testimony because it's fun eating. But let me just give you something that I found useful to understand what happened yesterday. Megan Kelly said yesterday on X, watching the Fani Willis, Nathan Wade hearing, they are toast, capitalized toast. One, her former close friend testified that the romantic relationship began well prior to when Fani hired him, by years, which means they lied to the court. Two, Wade claimed Fani reimbursed him for all the expensive trips, but no record of that because it was all in cash. OMG. He definitely got caught lying on his earlier court submissions in divorce court and attempted to say the reason he falsely swore that he had no receipts was because he only had credit card statements. Well, I mean, hello, she writes, I have secondhand embarrassment. Credit card statement, that is a receipt, you dope. He testified he had no records of it. And then yesterday was, you don't have credit card statements? Well, yeah, I have that, but that's not a receipt. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know we were talking to a third grader.
And of course, obviously, I guarantee he submitted credit card statements for purchases and expense reports at his office. I guarantee he's done that, as every other person who's ever, given a expense report has done. It's just so bad. And Glenn, like you mentioned, the friend who said this started in 2019, which would be basically the whole thing's blown up if they lied about the starting point of this affair. That was the second witness who came in and called by the defense to testify to this fact. The first one they came in was one of his attorneys, and he got out of it with attorney-client privilege. So they had a second person who was going to say it, but was able to get out of it on a technicality. Or they obviously wouldn't have called him if he wasn't going to say this. And they now have multiple witnesses, but only one on the record, saying that it was happened in 2019. So it is like, this is a catastrophe for them. And everything that you're getting from the coverage is, number one, she's a strong black woman, and number two, she was wearing fuchsia.
Yes, but it was beautiful.
Oh, okay.
It was just beautiful, and she stood out in the room as a bright, bright light.